Hello, welcome to Lopez Power Lopez review of Robocop. Ah! I am now a cop of the law. Oh. No, I was kidding. I just blew myself up to become Robocop. It's similar to the remake. But I'm not going to talk about the remake. I'm going to talk about the 1987 classic original film directed by Paul Verhoeven and starring Peter Weller as Robocop. Now, Robocop, it's interesting because I just saw this movie about a year and a half ago. I've never seen it before, but I've always heard it was near the time the remake was being released, and I've always heard people, talk about, like Robocop, if you like Terminator, if you like the science fiction, uh, violent action 80s movie, you'd probably like Robocop. And they were kind of right. I do like Robocop a lot. And it is very similar to the Terminator. So I finally watched it. First time I watched it was on TV, so I didn't really realize how bloody it was. But when I watched the uncut, well, the version I got was the uncut version. And wow, is it really bloody? The uncut version, it's almost unwatchable bloody. But then I got the regular R-rated version, which from the 1980s wasn't quite as bad. Um, and it was actually fine. It was still pretty bloody, but it was like distractingly. You can still get over it. Um, and I like RoboCop. It is very bloody. It's not. If you're a person that's kind of sensitive to that, you probably wouldn't like it that much. But I wouldn't call it unjustified violence. I would call it justified due to the fact that it's kind of a revenge story of him going after these bad guys that, kind of made him this way. And later in the movie, at first he's just kind of a computer, but as he gains this humanity, it kind of becomes. Robocop really reminds me of kind of a western set in the future. What it kind of reminds me of a Clint Eastwood movie, western, like Unforgiven. Violent movie, but I wouldn't call the violence unjustified. Um, it's justified because even though it is violent, we it's happening. It's what it is. It's crime being punished. That's what it is. Crime doesn't. It's because crime is being punished. Crime doesn't go unpunished, which is I think is a good moral that this movie has. Crime doesn't go unpunished. Um, and I think that's if it's that kind of message, I think it's okay. I mean, even still can be unsettling. I think it's okay to have violence because a lot of Clint Eastwood movies do that, where it's crime that doesn't go unpunished, even though it's violent. And so this movie is very similar in that regard. Um, Something like Friday the 13th movie where it's just bloody. It's not crime goes unpunished. It's just trash, blood for no reason. With something like this, it's I think it's okay because it's crime. Crime it shows that crime doesn't go unpunished. Um, so it really reminds me of High Plains Drifter and Pale Rider. Think about it. It's about a guy who, from a group of criminals, just kind of kill him, and he kind of resurrects in some form to come back to a certain area and clean up the town from the bad guys that wounded him. RoboCop is kind of like that. It's kind of like a High Plains Drifter or Pale Rider, kind of set in the in the not universe in the future. It's kind of High Plains Drifter, Pale Rider set in the future. And if you kind of think that the violence doesn't really bother you that much, um, it's similar to, it's, what it is it's serious, but it's also satire at the same time. It kind of satirizes 80s culture of what the future was going to be like. Like, it kind of satirizes the 80s culture and what they thought, kind of played a joke on how they thought what the future is going to be like. Similar to something like Back to the Future Part 2, where it's kind of a joke of what the 80s thought the future was going to be. Even though it is kind of a satire in that sense, it is still a pretty serious movie, action movie. Um, it It is very similar to the Terminator. Like it's kind of a gritty dystopian look of, like in the Terminator was Los Angeles. This movie's kind of Detroit. Although the Terminator does deal with the future and it is dystopian. It it does also show that in present day, also kind of a dystopian, kind of dark shadows, trash on the floor. It's set in present time, and with RoboCop, it's set more in the future, so it is very similar. Whereas Terminator, I think, does it more in a serious way, whereas RoboCop kind of does it more in a satirical way. Um, so it's got a very interesting style to the movie. Um, this movie is, again, it's kind of similar to the movie Die Hard. What makes this movie good is it's similar to other good movies. Like it's similar to the Western movies I talked about. It's similar to the Terminator. It's similar to the next movie I'm going to talk about, Die Hard, because Peter Alex Murphy is kind of in the beginning of the movie. He's kind of the everyman who becomes something more. He becomes more like powerful. Like he's kind of RoboCop is actually very similar to Iron Man, although I think I like RoboCop better because it's a little more. Uh, I don't want to say I guess maybe realistic, a little more gritty. Um, I think RoboCop is funnier. It is similar, but it's also different because where Iron Man is, it's just the suit. He still has his humanity. RoboCop is pretty much a robot. He's like more similar to Darth Vader, more machine now than man. See similarity. Similar to Darth Vader, more machine now than man. So it's interesting because throughout the movie, after he becomes RoboCop, he gets shot up by this gang that kind of runs Detroit, and this gang kind of is kind of like the main gang, I guess you could say, that's causing trouble for RoboCop. Like they deal in like ammunition and drugs and all that other bad stuff, and they kind of rob stuff. So they're the average street punk thugs, but they're working with the second in command at OCP, which is the company in the movie who's trying to tear down Detroit and make it into Delta City, trying to make a dystopian into a utopian. Um, and there's the guy is trying to make a machine called Ed 209, which is similar to Robocop, although it doesn't have the human brain function as Robocop. It's more, it's just like a normal, walking tank. It's kind of like those things you see in Star Wars that have two legs in the Ewok jungle. So it's similar to that, and he wants to use that instead of Robocop because he'll get more money for himself, whereas Robocop will go more to the company because it wasn't his idea. So he's trying to use crime so he could use his machine to make money. So it's kind of an interesting bad guy. Um, it's very it is kind of a funny movie because it it does have that satirical moment. So what it does is it kind of in the middle of the movie, it have like a commercial or a news broadcast, and it's like because back then the Star Wars thing was being generated. That was by Ronald Reagan, and that was like a space station that could shoot lasers at bad guys. It was an idea that Reagan had, and it's kind of satirizing that we would have that in the future where the lasers would shoot the bad guys and stuff like that. It's kind of a funny idea, and also it's like it goes wrong and it like hits like like Florida or something. It's hilarious. Um, and also how and also like the trailers, like because it was during the Cold Wars, like new or after, I think, like Nukem like game. It's kind of a funny look. It's a satirical look of what they thought like the future was going to be. If I had to guess what year RoboCop takes place in the 80s perspective, I'd guess it'd probably be like the late 90s. Like this is probably what they thought the late 90s would look like, early 2000s. I think that's what the director says, like the script, the original script of RoboCop, it takes place in like 1997, 1998. Um, so I think that's pretty much what the 80s thought the 90s were gonna be like, the late 90s. Uh, it's kind of a it's also funny, but it also is serious. It's a serious action movie. Like I said, it's kind of a revenge story. Like at first it's not, but then it becomes it because as he's RoboCop, he's like a machine. But as throughout the movie, he gets his memories back, and he starts remembering the street punk thugs that that helped him get like this kind of that shot him to death and beat him to death to make him RoboCop. So throughout the movie, he's starting to remember the bad guys. So then it becomes kind of a revenge story as he goes after them. But before that, he's kind of a superhero. Like he goes around stopping crime. Like he stops a building shooting. He stops a woman from being mugged, and he stops a grocery store robbery. But after he does those things, three things, he starts to realize that he's human. He starts to remember his family. He starts to remember his life as Murphy, and so he goes to get revenge. He has to go and punish the people that did this to him. The crime doesn't go unpunished, so he goes and punishes crime. It's a good movie. I actually do really like the movie. I think it's got kind of a good story. It's got twists and turns. It has a funny satirical element, but it also has a serious element to it. Um, it's kind of a movie about it shows kind of how important your humanity is. Kind of like you start to realize like how important your humanity is when it starts to be taken away from you. Like having a family, having a happy life with your job, stuff like that. And so it's kind of a story of he lost it, but he's going to go and be redeemed for it by fixing crime. So it's kind of a superhero story, and I really like it. It's kind of like a western, Clint Eastwood western. Um, it's very it's very 80s movie. If you like 80s action movie, you'll like it. I like this. This is I've seen. I didn't see the third one. I saw part of the remake, and I saw the second one. The second one I didn't really like that much. I thought it focused a little too much on the satirical element. Like I think the first one kind of had a good balance, but the second one was kind of like mostly tried to be like a funny movie, which I think Robocop is funny, but I think it also has a good balance of mystery and drama to it. And the second one was just kind of like, I don't know, just kind of was like weird. I thought it was kind of weird. I didn't really enjoy it. I didn't see the third one. I heard the third one was considered like one of the worst movies ever made, so I didn't see the third one. The fourth one I thought was an interesting movie, but I didn't think it was good, like that good. I thought it was an interesting take on the idea of RoboCop, but I thought what's the charm about RoboCop is he goes tries to clean up a dystopian world. And I thought they kind of made it a little too utopian. I thought the style didn't really. I know it was a remake, but I thought the new style didn't really mesh well with this idea as good as the old movie did. So, and also I can't remember that much about it. What's interesting about that movie is he's like in the first movie, how I said, he loses his humanity, and but he gains it. He's kind of lost his humanity, but he gets more and more human as he goes. And this one he gets less and less, and the new one he gets less and less human as he goes. Which I kind of find the first one a little more interesting. I think it gives us a little more uh, of a heartfelt, especially with his family, a heartfelt journey. A little more emotional impact, I think, with that the way the first one did it. Um, so I actually really like RoboCop. I would say I'd give it about a nine, an eight and a half out of 10 stars. About a nine out. I'll go nine. I like the movie that much. 9 out of 10. An A minus. Uh, 4 out of 4 stars. I really like RoboCop. I can't really say anything bad about it, except for it's a little bloody. I think the bloody does kind of get in the way of it, but I wouldn't say it's not necessarily unjustified, like let's say a Friday the 13th movie, because it is crime. It shows that crime doesn't go unpunished, like I said before. Uh, but it is still a little too bloody. But it's not distractingly bloody. Like the uncut version is kind of distractingly that way. But the written normal version is okay. But that's the only complaint I have about it. Like story wise, I don't see anything wrong with the story. I don't see anything wrong with the characters. I really like the character of Alex Murphy and his transition to Robocop and Robocop's arc, how he becomes in the beginning. He's like, I'm Robocop, protect the law, da 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 da. Da, 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 da. But at the end of the movie, he kind of gets his humanity back. And he's like, my name is Murphy. The guy's like, what's your name, son? After he gets rid of the bad guy, he's like, my name is Murphy. So he says it with a smirk. So it shows that he's kind of got his humanity back. So I think that's a great story arc. So yeah, I like RoboCop a lot. I give it about a 9 out of 10, 4 out of 4, an A minus. I recommend it if you're a fan of 80s movies, if you like The Terminator, or if you just kind of want to watch a good action movie. So that's my thoughts on RoboCop. I'll see you next review. Take care. God bless.